Good morning and welcome to TVNPA's July 2024 Community Program, Sponsorship Solutions, Trends, Tactics, and Insights for Nonprofits. We're glad you're all here. And thank you to Juliana Scheimer and Richard Peterson for joining us today to share their expertise on this topic. I'd also like to thank our community program sponsor, Sandia National Laboratories. Because of their generous sponsorship, we're able to offer these programs at no cost to you. And since we know you likely work for a nonprofit, this is important to have affordable educational opportunities. So thank you again, Sandia. We have a lot of exciting programs in the works, so I want to make sure you subscribe to our newsletter at tvnpa.org. I'm going to tell you about a few right now, so I want to make sure you're aware of them. First, in September, we're partnering with Three Valleys Community Foundation to continue our conversation from our May program, Charity Reimagined. Here we'll have trainings on how to adjust your conversations with donors to move towards investing into your organizations, which includes livable wages, functional equipment, marketing budgets, and more. We're still confirming the date on this. It'll be in September, so keep your eye out for that. On October 24th, our Anti-Poverty Collaborative program is going to be hosting a half-day forum on mental health. We have outstanding keynote speakers lined up, and we're working on securing our roundtable panelists, so watch for registration on this program as well. And finally, our Power of Giving event will take place at the Bankett Theater on November 13th. This is an exciting and inspiring evening, recognizing the amazing nonprofits that serve our communities and those who support them. Nominations are now open for our Power of Impact Awards, so make sure you nominate those great organizations, unsung heroes, and corporate partners. Nominations are open through August 2nd. So that's all of the business for now, and it looks like it's time to start our program. So we're going to start with a quick poll to get an idea of the level of expertise that we have in this meeting. So Carol, can you go ahead? I see she already launched the poll. So let's see where people land, if you can answer that. Always interesting to see. Right now, moderate is winning. So let's see. And it's a race. We're off. Moderate's still ahead with more than 50%.
Wow.
We definitely have those new to sponsorships in the room, and we have a couple of experts. So that's always great, looking to learn more. You never know what you can add to your expertise. So we have some extensive and some with limited. So we're all over, but moderate, somewhere in the middle, definitely wins the game. So there we have that. Thank you for responding to the poll. All right. So it's my pleasure to introduce Juliana Scheimer. Juliana is a California native and has called the Tri-Valley home since 1983. Juliana has more than 20 years of nonprofit leadership experience, including serving as a CEO, executive director, chief development officer, and chief administrative officer for social services and environmental organizations such as Habitat for Humanity, YWCA, Tri-Valley Health Center, New Door Ventures, and the Regional Parks Foundation. Juliana has raised millions to support the Tri-Valley community through her consulting services. And in 2022, we were fortunate that she joined the team at TVNPA. So welcome, Juliana.
Thanks, Kathy.
Then we have Richard Peterson, and Richard is the president and CEO of the U.S. Cultural Heritage Marketing Council. Based in San Francisco, his career spans more than 25 years of strategic sales and marketing for nonprofits, destinations, and arts and cultural institutions. He provides cross-industry expertise that embodies local, national, and international perspectives to meet the diverse needs of his clients. I first met Richard while working with Quest Science Center and quickly saw a skill in the sponsorship realm, so he immediately came to mind when we decided on this topic, and I'm grateful to have him here. So thank you for being here, Richard. We're going to start this day off talking about different types of sponsorship, and then we'll go into proper planning, outreach, how do you outreach to the organizations, and talk about what sponsors need. So to kick us off, I'm going to ask Juliana to start this conversation on the different types of sponsorships that nonprofits can pursue and talk about how they differ in terms of benefits and expectations for both the nonprofit and the sponsor.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kathy. Let's see. I think I have a quick slide on this. Let's see. Here we go. So first, again, sorry if we're being a little rudimentary here, but we recognize we have a mixed group. So some of you are really new to the sponsorship conversation and some of you have that extensive experience. So we thought we would start at the beginning and just really define what are sponsorships, what types can you potentially go after, and what would those mean for you? So number one, we have program sponsors. So with that, as you can imagine, I'm looking at Lisa with Set to Thrive. You're the center of my screen. She might have her backpack program where she's looking for a sponsor who can join her in, helping to raise enough funds to purchase 700 backpacks in a year of our kids living in the Tri-Valley who need them to go back to school. So she might find a corporate sponsor who's willing to give a financial contribution for her program. So with that, as you can imagine, it's treated a little bit like a grant application, I would say, in that regard. They're going to be looking for number of people served. They're going to be looking for the outcomes of the program, the reach, who are you serving, all of those wonderful things. The second type is our employee giving and volunteer programs. With those, again, it's exactly as you would imagine. These are different corporations who might be looking for opportunities to help build camaraderie within their employee pool. They're looking for opportunities to get their staff out there working together for a common cause. That does meet their needs as well, their CSR goals. So with that, they're looking to come out and clean up trails or pick up garbage, help you pack your backpacks. I mean, you can kind of put together a million different things under this category, but there are a lot of sponsors in this space. Many of them will give a financial contribution in addition to having their employees come out and serve for that day of service. The third would be for capital. Again, as you can imagine here, a lot of different corporations are looking for that name recognition, that logo placement. So as you're thinking about your capital campaigns, purchasing equipment, vans, vehicles, wings of buildings, entire buildings, these are different applications that you can put together as well. Again, that quid pro quo, what's in it for them, what kind of name recognition, what are the terms, how long is that sponsorship going to last? Those are all things we can talk about, but capital is definitely a category for sponsorships within the corporations. And then we have events, which I think is probably, if I were to have another poll question, I'm guessing that the majority of you have done mostly sponsorships for your events. So this would be for your golf outings. This would be for your galas, any other kind of annual event that you're putting on. You're looking for the revenues to produce the event. And then obviously, hopefully, we're having a net surplus. So whatever is brought in from these corporate sponsorships at the end of your events would be used for your programmatic purposes. And then the final one I did not put on the slide because I wasn't sure it would be relevant, but the more I thought about it, I thought it's at least worth mentioning, and that's cause marketing. So some of you may have seen that in the past where, I'm trying to think, a corporation like Coca-Cola, or we had one when I worked for the Parks Foundation with Drake's Brewing. They had a specific beer that they put out every year. It was kickback, and a portion of the proceeds of that beer sales would come to our parks and support our parks. So that's cause marketing. Again, that's another way of getting sponsorships and corporate engagements for your nonprofits. The one caveat I would say there is those are generally not tax deductible. So just make sure that you're thinking about that as you're developing your portfolio of sponsorship opportunities that you're pitching to the nonprofit partners. But with that, I'm going to stop with the definitions and I'm going to pitch it over to Richard to see if he wants to jump in on this as well. Oops, you're on mute, Richard.
And here we go. And I said something really brilliant. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Great to see you. Really great setup. The only one addition I would put into this is the in-kind sponsorships, which are really popular as well, given many financial limitations or just flexibility of timing of budgets across organizations. And so in-kind sponsorships, whether it's goods or services instead of cash, or if it's donated supplies, office equipment, office space, professional services, volunteer time, everything that really does have a hard cash connection to it, but yet you can build it into your budget as a savings or as a through line. So in addition to everything that you've just said, that would be the only additional one I would put in there. Thank you.
Yeah, and that can also include like raffle prizes. We do a lot for food for our events to save us money on that. So yeah, thank you.
Right.
Can you provide examples of successful naming rights or exclusivity sponsorships that you've encountered, and what makes these partnerships particularly effective?
You want to go first, Richard?
Yeah, I think that certainly what I'm finding is that, yes, there has been examples of that. And certainly if we look locally in the work that I've been, very, very fortunate to work on over the last several years with the Quest Science Center team there and the innovation fair that we're now continuing and getting ready. The 2025 dates will be coming out soon. That various levels of sponsorship, and it's great to see on this call some of our supporters of that as well across the Tri-Valley. And those exclusive naming rights really are connected to various tiers. And I know that Juliana will be showing some examples of that a little bit later on in the presentation. And those exclusive naming rights really are related to specific benefit channels or trunks of sponsorship. Beyond that, looking at an overall, large corporation or large organization coming in to underwrite an entire project of work, I've had more experience with that outside of the Tri-Valley of date over the last couple of years. But internally, successful naming rights for, like I said, the Quest Science Center Innovation Fair that we've held in the spring for the last couple of years have really been effective for the partners in that it allows them to really spend quality time with a select group of other like-minded organizations that are all striving for those same goals and mission-oriented results. And it really does help also for those participating in the program or attending the program to really see the importance of that commitment and support beyond the sponsorship itself. So yeah, I would say that just overall in the time that we have today, we'll send more additional information. That those are prime examples.
Yeah, and for me, a couple different examples came to mind. Some of them were local. So when I was working for the Regional Parks Foundation with the East Bay Regional Park District, and I can't take credit for this, it predated me, but it's a good example. 25, gosh, it's been almost 30 years ago now that the Park District launched its Trails Challenge program. And when they did that, so it's an annual program where they set up 5 different trails of different under different categories. So you have easy, moderate, and hard. So in total, there's about 15 different trails that they promote. And they want people to get out and do a certain number of trails or a certain number of miles in a year. If you do, you get a t-shirt, you get a pin that can kind of commemorate that year for you. And when they put that together, they went to Kaiser Permanente, and Kaiser became kind of that naming rights sponsor for that program and has been for probably close to the 30 years. In recent years, it transitioned. They did say they no longer needed exclusivity because they weren't funding 100% of it. The cost kind of went up from the first year it launched. Obviously, you can imagine over 30 years, maybe it used to only cost $25,000 to produce that, and now it's costing closer to $45,000 or $50,000 to produce that same program. So their level of giving wasn't able to keep up with inflation and with the increase in number of participants year after year. But when it first launched, and again, for more than 20 years of it, Kaiser was the kind of sole exclusive naming rights partner of that program. And what they got out of it, they had their corporate social responsibility for their employees. Number one, they wanted their employees to get out and be active. So this was something that they could promote to their physicians and nurses and MAs and all of those wonderful people to get out and be active in nature. They also wanted their patients to be active in nature. So this was kind of a win-win. Again, we could produce a program, make it completely free for people to participate in. And then Kaiser certainly got something out of that as well. Another one that comes to mind is kind of for the same industry, but this is one I was helpful and instrumental in creating, and that was that partnership with Drake's Brewing. We worked with them. They wanted to come up with this beer that they could give back locally. They were looking at several different organizations within the East Bay that they could partner with. And we were able to sell them on the Park District. You know, why should you partner with us? But we created a What's Brewing in the Parks program where we had 4 different events in the parks that were free every year. The naturalists would put on programs for families. You can invite people out and do different activities, and then they would have free samples of the Drake's beer at that event. So it was promoting getting families into the park. It was definitely promoting their brand and beer for people who like beer. And clearly if you didn't, we had other things, you know, food and other types of things available as well. But they also had that exclusive naming on that program also.
And there's a great, and Juliana, it's a really great pollination of, you know, the actual commitment of the cash and the sponsorship as a potential naming or key sponsor, but also the in-kind, you know, those other things that can come through that are sitting in, you know, in their storage or portfolio of product. And I think that's a really great way to amplify it across all channels.
Yeah, and just real quick, I'll add one thing. Well, it started, those What's Brewing in the Parks really did start with Drake's. We were able to add other corporations in year over year as we progressed the different events and progressed what we were trying to do with it. So eventually we had Whole Foods and REI as our partners as well. So Whole Foods could provide different food that we could give away or have cooking out there at the events. And REI would come with their lounge. I don't know if you all have ever seen that, but they have like a mobile lounge that they'll bring out there. And then they have activities, you know, that the kids could make. So it was a way, then we had 3 different corporations involved in that program.
So that was going to be one of my questions. So when you're talking about exclusivity, how do you bring in other organizations? Or when you talk about Kaiser naming it, are you limited to just Kaiser, or is it just name Kaiser, or can you bring other organizations in at different levels?
So for that particular one, it was just Kaiser. I think in subsequent conversations, maybe 2019, 2020-ish, they did say that they didn't have to be the only sponsor, that they recognized that they weren't paying 100% of it anymore. But as far as like a medical sponsor, they wanted to be the only one. So we couldn't go to, you know, Palo Alto Medical Foundation or John Muir Health or any of those folks to partner with us. They would have wanted somebody else. In the end, we ended up finding private donors who could join them because it just got a little bit complicated. Each year on the t-shirts, some of you may have them, I don't know, but you already had the Park District, Regional Parks Foundation, and Kaiser were kind of the 3 branded sponsors that were on that. And so we just chose not to have any additional sponsors. And then with Drake's Brewing, it was, you know, kind of Drake's What's Brewing in the Parks. But we could, on all of the flyers and things, put the other partner logos kind of at the bottom. So the top kind of naming sponsor was at the top of anything you would have seen. And then at the bottom, we would have said additional partners include or other sponsors include, and we would have those logos kind of at the bottom of all of the forms.
So do you have exclusive, you can have exclusive and other examples, like just at the top for the very top tier, and then you can have other sponsors at different levels along the way.
Correct.
And then what would you do for, like, we have a lot of banks in our area that sponsor. How would you manage that?
Well, I think it kind of comes down to the discussion on those exclusive rights, depending on whatever event it is. These are really great examples. And in the decision making with the team, you know, what is your goal and your mission? Really, what you have to go back to, what is your core mission for this program, this event, this activity, this, you know, body of work? And are you comfortable with exclusivity? Or do you make that a non-negotiable, that it is open for all? And I think in our world, in our community here in the Bay Area, there is definitely a friendly competition that does go on. But as you just said, you know, Juliana, Kaiser saying, look, it's okay, we can't fund everything, or we're still going to be supportive, but why should we be exclusive? There should be others that can come in, but maybe not be directly in competition with us. It's really become a much more nuanced conversation when it comes down to that. Like you said, financial institutions, I think for the most part, are pretty amiable to many others. They realize all boats will rise when they see that level of support being distributed across the community. So, yeah.
All right, thank you.
I'll just jump in real quick. I also think it's just being clear upfront. So when you're putting together your sponsorship packet that we can talk about here in a little bit too, if it's exclusive, put at what level that exclusivity starts. And so if you're meeting with Fremont Bank or something and you're saying for $50,000, you're getting name and rights and exclusivity, and we can talk about what that looks like. We won't have any other banks as sponsors of this event if that's what you would like us to do. So you're setting up that conversation. And then if they're saying, hey, I can't give that level, I can only give it the $10,000 level, then you come back to them and say, okay, that's great. But unfortunately, that means that we're going to be bringing in other partners in this space. And 99% of the time, they're usually okay with that.
Yeah.
So how can nonprofits effectively integrate employee giving and volunteer programs into their sponsorship strategies? And what are the key benefits of these types of sponsorships?
I could start with a few, Juliana.
Sure.
Do you have a slide on that? I couldn't remember if you did or
I
not.
don't have a slide on volunteers. No.
Okay, great. So, in the work that's been happening there in the Valley and really, across the Bay, but specifically for this area, and I think it was alluded on a little bit earlier in Juliana's conversation as well. And we also talked about the volunteer programs and what really it's about. I think the way to integrate it and have it be effective is that it really starts with the relationships within the company, them really understanding that their employee goals as a company support, bolster, or amplify, or sometimes mirror your goals as an organization, as a nonprofit, and that they'll actually be able to see their giving of their employees' time or their employees and their families to contribute. And that employee match, let's say it's payroll giving, a percentage of their payroll giving to donations and where those earmarked deductions go, are they being matched? And who are they being matched by? That's number one. Being able to actually activate technology. Many of them are saying, look, within the giving programs, especially with many of the companies across the Tri-Valley, for them to understand that they can actually look at their deductions and see where their dollars are going. An example is when I worked for a nonprofit here in downtown San Francisco, the California Academy of Sciences Museum in Golden Gate Park, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. In my employee donation program back in 2008 to 2014, I could actually see where my dollars were going as a nonprofit, giving to other nonprofits. And so we even had our own giving program separate from the corporate programs. That was really powerful because it puts the power of the donation into the employee's hands, and it really helps amplify your message all the way through. And I really think the other part is really communicating. The integration of this is wonderful, but communicating the impact. What is happening with their donation? How are those contributions being used? It's like, hey, thank you so much for being a corporate partner with your employee program or your volunteer program, but really, what are the impacts of those donations in time? That's really tangible. Those are really measurable. And that really helps also you bring on additional corporate partners. Again, resources are an issue, as we know, depending upon the size of your nonprofit and your board or your support, but it's certainly something to keep in mind.
And I've seen a shift with corporate engagement wanting to have these days of service or some kind of employee engagement, maybe more so over the last 10 years. I think, it used to be that they were fine with just writing the check and receiving the feedback on how you did your logo placements and what were the outcomes of it. But a lot of corporations want to keep their employees invested in, again, those causes that they have collectively decided is their culture and ethos of their organization. So if they want to support animals, they want to give their employees opportunities to go out and have those days of service or helping animals. And if it's in the environmental space, they're looking for ways to engage their employees there. So again, I know it's really hard for nonprofits. I've talked to so many people and they're like, we're small, we're mostly volunteer. We don't have a big space. How are we going to bring in these big groups of employees to do something for us? And I don't think it needs to be super complicated, but I would suggest to everybody that you just take a few minutes and think through that. Is there office work that can be done? Is there after hours things that can be done? Is there, maybe don't think in groups of 25, you can think in groups of 1 to 5 and have different options. And as you're negotiating with a corporate sponsor, you can kind of pitch those different levels to them. So, maybe you can only take 5 people at a time and it's not 25, but what could that look like for that corporation? So maybe it's a series of small events rather than something large.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, now you're on mute, Kathy.
Sorry. Are we ready to move on to proper planning?
Sure.
So we're going to move on to proper planning now that we've covered corporate sponsorships. The first question I have is, what are the most important factors to consider during the internal planning phase when preparing to seek sponsorships?
Juliana.
Want me to go first? So for me, I kind of have a long laundry list here. I'm a planner at heart, so those of you that are in this space with me, but I really like to think through before I launch something. What are our organizationally, what are our intended goals? Because you have to understand what it is you're trying to do before we can go out and kind of sell that to an organization to join us in that work. So for me, when I'm thinking through it, number one, I want to think through the whole year with that nonprofit. So how many events are you planning that year? Is it one? Is it an annual gala, a golf tournament, etc.? Or is it a series of events? And the reason that that's important for me when I start the planning process is you don't want to feel like you're going to those same donors every 3 months or every 2 months. You really want to feel like, can you go out to them with a multi-year ask or a year ask and say, this is what we're doing this year. We have 5 different events. This is how we would put your logo on each of those different things. So understanding what your own kind of strategic plan is and your goals are for events organizationally is really important, I would say, before the next year even starts. Then I want to think through the target audience. Who are we going to be having at each of these events? So when I'm outlining this, it's for each event. What's the geographic range that we're serving? Who's coming? Are they lower income? Is it underserved, or is it just the community at large? There's no right or wrong answer. You just want to make sure that you can articulate to the funder, who's going to be there, who's going to recognize their brand. Are these potential new customers or clients for them? Again, is it meeting their corporate needs? So you want to be able to do that. Demographics are also super important. Again, what are the age ranges of the people that you're going to be serving, different genders, income levels, etc. Then I say, like, psychographic is a term that comes up when you talk about sponsorship sometimes. So that's the interests of the people that are in attendance. Again, are you going to help them with that corporate social responsibility alignment? So are these people that are also into the environment? Are these people who are also into serving children, homeless children, foster youth? What are they interested in, and how can you kind of partner this organization with the people that you're serving? Then I also want to think about who internally is going to be leading these efforts. So if you're a small organization, is it falling completely to the CEO? Are you using your board of directors? Is it your development director? Are you blessed enough to have an events person working with you who would be responsible for doing all of this corporate outreach? Do you have funds to hire a firm like Richard? They help produce these events and can find your sponsorships and do some of those things. So thinking through that. And then that leads into your budget. So once you know if it's internal or external and how many events are you going to be producing, what cost, what is that going to look like for your organization for that year? What kind of time and materials are you going to need to put into it? And finally, how are you going to measure your success? So that's kind of my internal framework, because these are all things that you'll use to put together your external pieces in communicating with the different sponsors. I've rambled, Richard, your turn.
No, you did wonderfully. And I think part of it also comes down to, if we go back to the capabilities of the organization, you as a team who are actually doing this work, looking at those support systems and really understanding whether internal or external, board or volunteer, that's a lot of wrangling, that's a lot of management, and it really kind of comes down to people management, project management, and time management. And I think Juliana and I and Kathy probably know a little bit about that firsthand, as well as many of you do. But being able to work through that and keeping that top of mind in everything that you do, it is really important from everyone that's that's a part of the process. And I think also really think about the overall your budget. Going back to your original question, Kathy, what should you consider around your internal planning in preparing to seek sponsorship? So what is your goal? What is your actual revenue goal? What is your short-term target, your near-term, and your long-term? And then really looking at the cost, the cost of goods, or the cost, opportunities that are related to that, which goes right into not only the event itself, but staff time, marketing, any administration costs. So that overall graphic that you may create, and sometimes I do it as a graphic versus just as a running rambling sheet, and really looking at the quadrants and really seeing where those cost savings can happen. And again, it really kind of comes down to the organization. The last part is the legal part. Really, as an organization, as you're getting ready for either an ongoing program or you're developing a new program or event, to really think about the contracts and the agreements, making sure that they are buttoned up, that they are all ready to go, because any sponsorship program package, going to a corporate or to another, financial institution, whoever it might be, or even to a private donor, private giving, philanthropic giving, it really comes down to the expectations of that agreement, not only exclusivity, but also the deliverability within the agreement, the timelines, and also the ethical relationship of those guidelines and how it relates to your organization and their organization. Our world has changed, and the ethics around giving and the standards around those agreements, that they don't jeopardize your mission as a nonprofit because of how those dollars were bequeathed for that event. So it's really important on the ethical side of that to understand it. But that's a whole nother area that's a little bit deeper, but that can be a part of that, template agreement that you have, and how you may want to revisit that.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how nonprofits can use SMARTY objectives to enhance their sponsorship planning and ensure inclusivity and equity in their approaches?
Yes, we can.
We even have a slide
on this one.
Yeah.
So again, planner at heart, grant writer, many of you I see in this room are the same and work in this space a lot. You've all, I'm sure, heard of SMART goals. In recent years, it has morphed into SMART E goals. So the definition of that is SMART, measurable, achievable, results-oriented, time-bound, and now we're adding inclusive and equitable into that definition. So whether you're writing a grant or whether you're putting together a sponsorship outreach packet, I would look at any of the goals of the events that you're putting together and what you're trying to do under this framework. So you want to be able to tell them, our goal is to, making this up, help X number of children by X date by doing X. So it's time bound, it's definitely measurable, it's who you're serving. The organization's going to get a snapshot right away of, again, what are they getting out of this? Not only who's coming to the event, yes, there's 1,000 people there, but in the end, it's you're trying to raise X number of dollars to serve X number of people in this capacity, in this timeline. And again, that equity or inclusive and equitable addition to that, I think, is super important, because now, corporations, all of us, I think, are thinking differently, and we're really trying to make sure that, can everybody attend? When you're putting together the costs of your event, do you have are sponsorships helping give tickets away to people who couldn't afford to come to your event otherwise? Are they helping you put together something so that it's free to the public? So those are just things to think about. And when I talked about the importance in your internal planning of knowing who your audience is and who's coming, and the income range and ethnicities, demographics of whom you're serving, you really want to be able to articulate back to whomever your sponsor is that you're thinking about these things. That this isn't just for affluent, wealthy people, and sometimes that's the case if it's a gala or something and you need certain people in the room, but just recognize what is the goal of the event that you're putting on. If it's a community event, you really want to make sure that it's for the whole entire community, nobody's left out, welcome to attend, and that you're thinking through, how to fund that and how to make that possible as part of your internal planning process.
I have no other further details to share in that. Beautifully said. And I think that, as you know, most of the people in this conversation, they would be connected to this process in some way previous to the call, given the poll at the very beginning of today's conversation. But again, we'll touch on each of these as we continue on this morning. But thank you for that overview, Jim.
All right. So, well, can you talk about some effective strategies for creating compelling marketing materials and mock-ups to present to potential sponsors?
So we have a couple slides on this, correct, Juliana?
We do. I can, I wasn't quite sure where to share these, so we'll pull them up now and we might pop in and out through them.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of slides that just go through the different event sponsorship levels, but let me stop sharing this for a second, and I'm going to pull up packet examples just so you can see how a couple of different organizations are putting together the materials that they're sharing externally.
And we'll be sending this out afterwards, so you don't have to screenshot it or put your head face right to your computer.
Exactly.
So this is just so she can review it.
Okay, sorry about this. I've got a couple different things going on, but let me start to share again.
As Juliana's pulling it up, one of the things we're going to be seeing here are some ideas of, engaging formats, design, formatting, and then branding that comes along with it. And again, these are all very adaptable, but they're all really great examples of where we're considering some of these concepts.
So I'm going to, again, we can talk about this throughout this conversation, but I'm going to give you 3 examples of 3 different organizations and what they thought about in putting a sponsorship packet together. First, because it's TVNPA, let's talk about Power of Giving. That's the big annual event that TVNPA produces in November of every year. We used to just do kind of that sponsorship grid and with a letter, and now we've since morphed it into an actual packet. So we talk about who's going to be there, what they can expect by attending, what type of people will be coming, whether it's elected officials, general community members, board members, nonprofit leaders. Obviously, this is an annual recognition of all of the great work of the Tri-Valley nonprofit. So it's very heavily influenced by nonprofit leaders, board members, volunteers in attendance, but we do get some government officials that will join us as well. Then we want to talk about ways to get involved. So with this particular event, obviously, number one, we want to list it first, become a financial sponsor. That's going to help us produce the event, put it on, have the food and all of the wonderful components that hopefully many of you have experienced year after year. As Kathy said earlier, we need donated goods and services. Some years we can get the food donated. Sometimes it's just a partial donation. We get raffle items donated from businesses that will help us, raise additional money through the raffle sales, or they can just, either money towards those, or they can donate the raffle items themselves. Then we talk about the benefits. So again, who's going to be in attendance and what's the reach of our organization? So if we put out a press release, how many people are going to see it? If we put out Facebook posts, how many people are going to see that? Not only number of followers, but sometimes we'll do paid Facebook ad posts, and we can say, we've paid for 10,000 people in this zip code to be able to see this ad or this program. So we want them to know upfront that this is the reach by joining us. We then have, again, the sponsorship grid. So this is the first year, I believe, that we've gone up to $10,000. It's our 10th anniversary. So, I think it's time. And also the number of people that attend year after year are becoming larger, more people. So the costs of producing the event are going up. So we have a range from $1,000, which, helps some of the smaller local smaller corporations give to the nonprofit event, all the way up to $10,000, which is our benefactor sponsorship level. So with that, we've thought about, in addition to reserved seating or number of tickets, is there any sort of a VIP reception? Is there, press releases? What else can we give them? Sometimes, depending on the membership or the financial level of contribution, they'll get a free TVNPA membership. They get a certain number of days where they can use the Common Point Nonprofit Center. So again, this is really specific to the nonprofit that's putting this together. Some of you may not have office space that you can let them use, etc. But you might have something else that you can offer instead. So this is just how we've kind of put this together. And then how do they give? How are they going to pay for their sponsorship materials, and what's required of them? We need their logo, high resolution files by X date in order to make it into all of the publications that we're putting out, a save the date or the program, etc. So just making sure that they understand any deadlines that come with this sponsorship. And then we have a form. Again, we had that QR code. They can go to the website and make it super easy, or they can fill out this form and return it with a check. And those are just different ways that they can make their contribution. I'm going to show one more. So this is another example, another organization locally that's putting on 2 events this year. So I wanted to share this one because this was an example, again, of an organization that instead of going out for multiple things, they've thought about this year we're having 2 events and this is how we're going to package it. This doesn't happen for them every year. I don't think that they do a gala every year, but they do the event called Family Harvest Farm. It's the festival for foster youth. But this year they're having 2 for their 35th. So they've made that clear from the beginning that with one gift, they're going to be getting recognition at both of those events throughout the year. It talks about their mission and why you should want to be partnering with them. Gives a little bit of information about each of the different events, dates that they're going to be happening, how many people will be in attendance, the benefits of sponsorship. Again, they have a reach section, so this is unique to them as a nonprofit organization. How many people do they have in their database that will be receiving e-newsletters? What's their reach with press releases, any paid media on social media, etc. Talking about their website monthly visits, if that's something that you can easily pull together. Again, that's another great statistic to include. And then finally, the number of people that they expect to be in attendance. Again, you can see their sponsorship levels are higher, but again, it's because they have 2 events. So I think that they haven't always had them be this large, but because the organization, the corporate sponsor is going to be getting more out of it, they've done that. So they also have this inclusivity for the presenting sponsor. So if they get a $50,000 donation, again, that's naming rights. They're going to get kind of that bill of placement, and they're only going to have 1 at that top level. And then they've broken out the second event, that's the smaller event, and what would you get, again, for the different levels of contribution there. And a form. So that's how, very similar to TVNPA's, but that's how they've put theirs together. And finally, I want to share one more. And this is an animal organization. So what I loved about this one is, again, they have thought through and put together all of the different events that they have. So they have more than 2. So they talk about who they are, compelling photos. I mean, how do you not fall in love with puppies and kittens, right? Again, but what do they offer? How many people, or how many pets, I should say, are they serving in a year? What kind of educational programs are they doing? I loved this infographic. This is their reach. Again, much larger organization than the 2 nonprofits I previously highlighted, but 20 million page views last year, 190,000 email subscribers, 41,000 donors. So right out of the gate, they're sharing with the corporate sponsor, like, if you partner with us, this is going to be the reach of your organization. Then they talk about the benefits. Why should you support us? Why is this important to you? And finally, then they start going into the events themselves. So they have a wine dinner that has, they've been doing it for 23 years. It has about 200 attendees. They raise $200,000 annually. Then they have the demographics of who's going to be there, the average age of who's going to be there. The Whisker Whirl, same thing. They've done that for 15 years. They have 300 people and 100 dogs in attendance. They raise nearly $300,000. And then they talk about the demographics of who comes to this event. And I thought this was great. I will admit, I know that this is important to do, but I think it just depends on your organization and your reach. But they've done some event promotional examples that they're including. So for this Whisker Whirl, these are some of the pieces that they put together. So their save the dates, their invitations, their thank yous. They give example from prior years of, what does it look like to have the logo placement and the table sponsors, et cetera. So right away, if you're a corporation looking to partner here, you can see these are the types of social media posts that are going to be put out, and this is what they're going to give us in return for our contribution. And finally, I thought this was great too. They have their past supporters. So again, if you're thinking about it from their perspective, the corporation's perspective, they want to know that they're partnering, their logo is going to be placed with other like organization logos, and that they're not going to be put next to something that doesn't mesh with their own corporate philosophy. I used this one a lot when I was working for Habitat for Humanity. We had a rule like we would not take any tobacco sponsorships. It was just part of Habitat for Humanity International that we would not do that. So anyway, it's important for certain corporations to see that they're not going to be placed with another organization that wouldn't mesh with their organizational structure.
Those are great. Thank you, Juliana.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Did you have more on that, or?
Well, I think, because as we were talking about this earlier, I think from the examples there, we could share many more examples, and we'll get a few more examples shared in the follow-up. That I just really want to kind of clarify a little bit more what she shared and what you're seeing as themes here, right? And looking at the chat, it's really great to see the conversation that's going on. Like Marcy saying, this is great. Always wanted to have this style of a sponsorship package. TVNPA doing the power partnership. It's like evolution of sponsorship development continues to be adapted to what the corporate requirements are or corporate expectations are, whether it's through their marketing department or their government affairs and external affairs department, or if it's just a line item budget for giving, right? With each organization, where those dollars are coming from and through and utilized by the organization really differ, but packages like that, if you have the capability to bring it in, and I have to say, let's put animals, pets on every single sponsorship package, because everybody was really engaged and smiled, and it pulls at the heartstring. And I feel that these formats also need to be adaptable. You don't have to be printing a lot of flyers. You don't want to be doing all that. You want to make it really adaptable to technology to ensure that the decks and the digital application, they can be customized if you need to, very, very, at least maybe the intro, or maybe there's a closing summary that maybe it's a letter from the CEO, maybe it's a specific ask, but those customizable options for what we've just seen are also really important, that they can be done efficiently. And then I also think one of the other parts of it is video content that can be really worked into these sort of programs of ask within those documents, within the PDFs, or within, if it's a PowerPoint or however you're presenting it, you can have embedded video as well. And in that, you can actually have, sponsorship, previous sponsors, Juliana, as you were just talking about. We can have sponsor, testimonials, 10-second, 15-second testimonials versus them just being text on the screen. So all these things are very, very adaptable and very, very affordable from where they used to be even a couple of years ago. So some things to keep in mind as we continue to talk about what these packages are looking like. And marketing is just not the straight printed material or the digital, that social media post anymore. It's really much more integrated for these companies and for the nonprofits, and it's very adaptable.
One other thing I would say, I'm looking at Marty, who is TVNPA's board chair, and she's been so helpful as we've put together our packets year after year. So getting feedback, who is going out there and seeking these donations? Are they going out? Are your board members trying to get the in-kind donations or sponsorships for your events? So making, previously, I think in our packets, we didn't talk as much about the in-kind or things like that. But as they're going out and looking for raffle items, like why have 2 different packets or 3 different packets? Let's create one thing, and then to Richard's point, you can pull pieces of it out if you need to and kind of customize it since it's all digital. But hearing from them, what do they need to be successful, and making sure that your packet has all of those components. So just get feedback.
And this year, we've asked each of our board members to secure one sponsorship each. And so we need to give them the materials to be able to go out there and talk about it and answer any questions and provide be able to close it. That's what we want them to do. So,
I love that last word, close it.
yeah.
That's awesome. Wonderful. Thank you.
So let's talk about outreach for a little bit. How do we get to these sponsors? So can you talk about what are some of the best practices for researching potential sponsors and identifying organizations that align with your nonprofit's mission and goals?
Yeah, I can start on this, and let's have a conversation, Juliana.
Sure, go for it.
On this. When I took some notes on this, and I think really what it comes down to, going back to your planning phase, understanding where you are, if it's a first time event, really rolling up your sleeves as an organization and getting as many people involved in that brainstorming conversation. You as a small staff don't need to do it alone. And that you really should lean in, as we just talked about, Kathy, to the board or any volunteers within the organization, and really make this a group brainstorming event at first. For those events that have history or legacy, I think ensuring that you're clarifying your goals even further as you go through this, and again, reestablishing what's worked in the past, where do you want to add on with, maybe you're increasing your audience, demographics is one thing, but also who is your audience for this program? Is it the same audience that you've had? You talked about the power of giving, how it continues to grow every year. I know with Quest Science Center and the Innovation Fair, we've seen how at Alameda County Fairgrounds, how it's really become this, Bay Area experience, that, everyone's coming in, and the demographics and the target audience, while still the core, which is the youth and the educational programs, we're also seeing a much different demographic because of the technology and innovation of the Tri-Valley and the individuals who want to come and rub shoulders and just see what's happening and have that experience. And then really understand your ability in your outreach to say, who are you already working with? Who are you already compelled to be connected with, whether in the community, through community programs, community activities, maybe you're involved with local organizations, as many of you are, or other nonprofits or chambers or other boards or organizations, and really understanding how that network of opportunity can be then amplified through your board. Every single member of your board, every single member of your team is involved, most likely, with external organizations, capturing that at the very beginning and ensuring that that becomes part of your network for sponsorship outreach, and defining, okay, are we looking for those exclusives? Are we looking for naming organizations first? Or are we looking to renew those that came last year? Do they still fit in with the program? Do they still have an interest in, was it a value for them? And if it was of a value, will they, increase their donation year over year? But it's really interesting in this process. You really need to start in the discussion internally to ensure that the alignment can then be best positioned with the board or your team or your staff members or your volunteers to understand what those sponsorship opportunities are, and then meaning identifying the organizations as you go through that process. It can be tedious, but I would say it's also about the timing. It normally has to happen anywhere from 8 to 12 months out. It really needs to begin. I say when the program ends, the sponsorship engagement begins for the next event, meaning at least cultivating and following up and ensuring that those conversations are happening as you're building the next year program. I think everyone on this call knows that, but those are just some top line points that I just like to share about identifying the organizations. I think starts really internally as to how does it align with what your goals are or the event's evolving needs, because that can really dictate what those organizations are.
I agree with Richard. I would say start internal. I'll give you all my little secret tips that aren't so secret, but number one, start with who you know, right? Looking at your board of directors, where do they work? Who are your vendors? I'm sure a lot of you have seen different sponsors, law firms, banks, etc. I'm almost guaranteeing you that that organization is a client of that corporation. So again, who do you know? Who's in your universe? Make your list there. Write down any notes that you have with affiliations. Is it a board member that can help make that contact for you? Do you know what other types of giving that they've done in the past? Second, I would say I know a lot of you do this as well, but you're going to events all the time. We support each other. We're going to, all sorts of nonprofit events throughout the year. I always ask all of the staff members who do that, bring me the program back. Again, I don't think we're taking from anybody else. A corporation might support many different industries. So they might be looking for, food services that they can support. And they're also looking for animal welfare that they can support. And they're also looking for the environment. So I don't think we need to consider that competing with one another, but it's helping us to understand where has that organization given at what level for what cause, and you can start building your database that way. Again, I find corporate sponsorships on one hand is easier than grants, but on another hand, it's harder. And it's that research piece that's harder. We don't have databases for sponsorships that we can go cull. So it really is a lot of that groundwork that you're doing yourself. It takes a lot of people power. But again, if you're asking board and staff, did you go to an event? Send it to me, scan it to me. Let me see those logos. Let's build our database. And then finally, I'm saying, look in the paper. Again, what are you seeing as far as press releases or different sponsors that are out there? And finally, the book of lists. I know some of these things can cost money, but if you look at the book of lists every year, you're going to be able to see the largest corporations, how many employees they have, what types of things they're into, and then you can pull that every year into your database. You can also use the library to search different corporations by, city, zip code, number of employees, overall revenues, et cetera. So I've often used those tools as well. And that can be helpful for grants too. And then I would say, again, that people power. Unfortunately, I wish I had some magic solution for you, but you're going to have to go through each one. And as you'll find, many of them have two sides of the house, which is great, but you need to understand those two sides of the house. So we know Fremont Bank has two sides of the house. We know Kaiser Permanente has two sides of the house, meaning they give through grants where it's a traditional application process that's quarterly or annually or whatever that is. And you know all the forms you have to fill out. Or it's through their public relations department. And it truly is more about sponsorships and logo placement and kind of more of that sales and alignment side of things. So they're going to have different people that you're going to have to contact, different phone numbers. So if you don't have a database, make sure that you have a great Excel system or some sort of table that you can work with to put all of this data together.
Absolutely. Data is king. Everything we've talked about comes down to information gathering and really ensuring that it's not sitting, in notebooks or, in various Excel spreadsheets or emails back and forth, that, there is one central point, even if it's relating around one specific event where that event upload goes into your CRM or into your database, your master database, which of course you're going to use for many other things outside of just requesting sponsorships. It's about communications and newsletters and outreach and everything else that you're doing as an organization. So data, CRM, and information capture is probably the largest opportunity, but also, as Juliana just said, one of the biggest time consumers, because it really is about getting the right data in, being able, there's many different ways to do it. I think interns are wonderful. And
I was just going to say that.
Lean into interns a lot. We have wonderful universities. You can go beyond high school informative, but we have wonderful university and colleges here across the Tri-Valley and the Bay Area, and they will love to do work on all sides of the counties. So by all means, I would definitely use interns.
Well, let's talk for a minute about how nonprofits can build and maintain relationships with key contacts within sponsor organizations, especially when dealing with gatekeepers.
I know the term gatekeeper might not be pleasant for some, but it's true. Throughout my career, I found, and they're doing their job, But if somebody's an admin assistant or an executive assistant for CEO, vice president, et cetera, it's their job to make sure that, you know, you're relevant to the person that they're working for or with. So I have found, yes, you may have done your research and you may know that this is the CEO or this is the vice president of public relations, or they might even have a CSR person that you need to speak with. But not only are you trying to build relationships with that person, it's finding out who their assistants are, or, you know, who their teams are, who works with them, and building relationships there, because then they can often advocate for you and help you get in the door. So, you know, so yeah, that's that term gatekeeper. But that's just been my experience, is that you can't just go after one person in the organization, and there's turnover too. So sometimes it's important to have more than one contact in a department that you're working with. And then, Richard, you just said it too. Make sure you're following up at the end of your last event. Don't let it stop there until your next ask. Make sure that you're building that relationship over time, so that you're either emailing them or calling them post event and saying, you know, this is how it went. Thank you so much. Or here's some pictures we'd like you to enjoy. Or thanks for coming. Hopefully they came, you know, all of those wonderful things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, yeah, being able to understand that that individual, or maybe there's two gatekeepers, depending upon the department you're working with, that they're managing a lot for that organization, and, you know, what's coming at them at any given day or any given month, based upon their workflow. And being cognizant of that you may not get immediate responses, you know, and not to take that personally. You may finally get a response and they're like, well, you're talking to the wrong department, or I'm so sorry, we're, you know, can you just send it to our general information box, right? So you're really trying to get to the right individuals. But I always say, if you can do the in-person meeting, it's so much better than a virtual meeting, especially for these asks. It's like, you know, I'll be in your neighborhood next week. I have some time between, can I pop by for 15 minutes and just briefly walk through this with you and at least introduce myself and have that conversation? I think with the gatekeepers, sometimes they don't have that personal one-on-one. So I actually, when possible, prefer that individual touch and approach, because it does, you know, just breaks down the barrier that the next time you email them, they'll respond. And I don't go in empty-handed if I can't, you know, to bring in something for them, a little gift, you know, a little thing of cookies, or, you know, just being very genuine about the approach, because they're busy. Maybe it's grabbing a coffee, you know, if their time allows. But those conversations, depending upon the gatekeeper's role, sometimes it's not an administrative assistant, you know, it is a director of marketing or director of public relations, and it needs to go to the VP level or the executive level. Their time is just as valuable. So I always say, being able to, and when you do see them out at events, you know, remember that going to those events of like organizations, you have a chance to sometimes network with those gatekeepers, because you know that they're at that position, they're at that role where they're the public face of that organization on development or engagement. And you can go back to, you know, you can spend some time with them at that event very, very casually, versus making it a hard pitch. So I think it's that nuance of the art of the game when it comes down to the gatekeeper, and just really respecting them at all times. Yeah.
I also say it's like all development, it's relationship building. I won't give away who this is, but you know, major vice president of an organization locally found out they love Disneyland, right? So it's you know, taking notes, knowing what they like, being able to find something that you have in common and build a personal relationship with that person that's kind of outside sometimes of the scope of the actual application itself. But use your CRMs for that too. You know, make notes. Their kids in college, their wife just got their PhD. You know, whatever it might be. You know, make sure that you're humanizing this role as well, just like you would if you were asking for a major gift or something else. You want to make sure that they are corporations, but they're people too. So invest in those relationships.
And I kind of goes down to, I go back to when we were going through a couple of years ago, just as, you know, a community, but in the nonprofit world, you know, during COVID and during many of the economic and socioeconomic issues that were happening, not only here, but, you know, around the country, specifically in the Bay Area, how, you know, how those communications and how those conversations are much different than they are now. how do we tap back into that empathy and understanding of the people that we're working with? So they, many of them are working in a department where they're not fully staffed back up. They're still made to do the work and be a part of what we're asking them to be a part of. So being respectful of that. So again, I think that, those relationships, what you just said, Juliana, is so important to build that relationship if you can. And you may not get the ask that you want this year for this event, but gosh golly gee, next year as you keep up with them and now they're in their communication cycle, maybe you're inviting them to mixers, maybe they're getting your newsletter, they're seeing who you are. It builds that relationship. Each of those are steps in the process. Yeah.
So we're only have time for a couple more questions, and then because we want to give people the opportunity to ask some questions. I have two more I'm going to ask. The first one is, what are some innovative ways to pitch sponsorship proposals and close deals with potential sponsors?
I find it's really about the focus of the program and the focus of the event. I use this in all my work. It's about telling a story, having a thread, and keeping that focus on what is your message, because everything in the presentation options that you've seen and some of the samples, you could see there was a specific thread of marketing and conversation or storytelling. So whichever word you prefer to use that you're comfortable with, but it comes down to people being able to relate to themselves in the pitch and understanding whether it is specific black and white, this is the value proposition, here's what the output will be, and it's a very simple program ask, or if it's a little bit larger, which is that annual body of work that we were just talking about as well, which is really, really powerful, really connecting into what the exclusive opportunities may be, what the flexible opportunities may be, and then really also, like I said, having the stories or video components, if you can, incorporated into your proposal, especially if it's a larger body of ask. That should be a little bit more extensive. It should be more extensive. It should have a lot, more meat on the bone to ensure that people really understand what you're doing because of the overall approach that you're taking for that sponsorship proposal or ask. So those are just top line ideas. I'll have a few more to share as we wrap up here. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think for me, the biggest tidbit I could give you would be, again, going back to that research and homework ahead of time. I think knowing, what does the corporation need out of this sponsorship? What are their goals for the year? What are they trying to do for the community, for their employees, et cetera? Have you put your materials together in a way that speaks to all of that for them? Like Richard just said, it tells your story. So pictures of animals, pictures of kids, pictures of past events. You're trying to show them what that looks like. Sending them to a website link, maybe with other videos or photos or whatever, but really trying to pull them into that experience. And I think if you've done your homework well, you know the levels that they give to for other organizations, the types of organizations they give to. Hopefully, again, this might take a couple years to get the rhythm, but hopefully you'll know at least generally what their sponsorship budget looks like and what their application timelines are. Some of them do quarterly, some of them do monthly, but I can tell you most of them will run out of money towards the end of the year. So even if your event is November or December, ask them towards the beginning of the year. You don't want to be at the end where they say, oh, sorry, we gave it all away by the third quarter, and so again, you can make those notes in your CRMs, but those are just some of the things that I've learned over time. If you do get a no, it's not often, that sometimes it's just they ran out of money and they say, come back to us next year. Or some of it could truly be, oh, sorry, we're only giving to these X organizations this year. So just kind of understanding what it is that corporation wants to be involved with, and are you a good fit for them or not? And it's okay to take someone off your list. I can tell you that too. If you've gone after them a couple of different years and they haven't funded you, or you see them continuing to give to other organizations, it's okay. It just might mean that your cause may not be the right fit for what they're trying to do in the community. So it's just finding others that can do that for you.
Great point.
All right. So now that you have your sponsor and you've got them, How should a nonprofit follow up with a sponsor after the program or event? And how should they steward the relationship before making another ask?
Go
And
ahead.
I treat this like all development. I was trained several years ago. I don't know if the benchmarks have changed, but it's kind of stuck in my mind. But you should have 6 touch points for every ask. So whether that's an email newsletter that you're sending them, a social media post, hey, I saw you were in the news today, whatever that looks like, make sure that you're not just constantly with your hand out asking for money. Make sure that you're giving them something or having a relationship with them throughout the year. And most importantly, follow up with them after that last event. Make sure that they know you did what you said you were going to do. Make sure that, if you said you were going to have X number of people or send X number of press releases or whatever it was in that sponsorship grid that you offered them, make sure that they know that you did that, because you want their trust. You want them to know that you take this seriously and that they are getting something for their money, right? So make sure that you're not just sending them the tax receipt at the end of the year with this is the deductible portion of your gift. Make sure it's a thank you or photos or something more personal and continue investing in that person and that relationship in between. As Richard and so many others have said, invite them to other things. If it's, I don't know, like TVNPA, we do check presentations. We talk about that. Who should we invite to this? So each organization is going to be different, but do you have something where you're not asking them for money that they can come to that stays connected to your organization?
The wonderful. I'll ditto, ditto, ditto. And the one thing I love to do is invite them in as a special speaker or a guest to board meetings or executive committee meetings, where they're able to come in. Maybe it's 1 or 2 sponsors that are not competing. They've been your supporter, but you bring them in and they give a 15-minute update on their organization. Yeah. And you're getting insight and you're just listening. That way you're not worrying about an ask. They know about your organization, they're supporting you, but you want to hear from them. What are they doing? This is where that executive sharing happens. And then it just continues to grow, because events are great. Cocktail parties, chamber meetings, mixers, events, programs, we're all doing them. But they're going to come into a room, a boardroom, a much more formal setting, and to have that conversation or just around a table somewhere over lunch just changes the perspective, and so much can come from that. So thank you.
If you have any questions, feel free to throw them into chat right now. I'm going to ask, do you give gifts to your sponsors?
I think that's tricky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that's getting to know your sponsor. More often than not, they're going to say no, thank you. I think that they would rather the money go towards your mission. And they also have rules. I mean, we really didn't touch on that at all, but make sure that you're looking at the IRS deductibility, tax deductibility rules that are out there. For even what their sponsorship portion can be tax deductible. If it's $10,000, but they got X numbers of dinners at a gala for that portion is not tax deductible. Gifts over, I think, $25, they're either not supposed to take, or it also is supposed to be taxed. So right. I think that they can be a little weird about it sometimes. Cards, photos, some kind of memento from the event, probably yes. But I don't think that they want to see you spending kind of their money that they've given you for an event and program support to come back to them.
Absolutely. Very good question, Kathy. The majority is no, really no gift is required. I would go back to if there was a group photo and, you want to have photos, printed and sent off to everyone, but most everyone's doing digital, just send it digitally and they can, keep it as a screensaver on their system. Or maybe it's something that they want to place into their corporate newsletter or to their company newsletter and their community engagement program, especially if we're talking about staff and volunteers. If we go back to that sort of sponsorship, where it goes through HR and then HR is then putting it into their employee handbooks. I mean, all these things where these materials after an event, the post-event engagement can be a wonderful way to continue the conversation without having to actually give a gift. Yeah, I think it's better to side on the side of not doing that, but that's a case by case question.
I agree. I had someone ask me that recently, and it gets tricky. It gets tricky, and you don't want to spend money on a sponsorship, right? Because that like defeats the purpose. So,
Exactly.
we have a few questions in the chat. The first one is from Christine, and it's, do you have different sponsorship packets for large and small sponsors? Like thinking local mechanic and Workday.
I think you can do that. I don't. I just try to have different levels in the grid that talk to, kind of what they'll get out of it.
Yeah.
And there's several reasons for that. Part of it is, if I'm being honest, you wanted that moves management in your kind of prospect pipeline. You want them to understand the different levels and who else is contributing at each level and what their, kind of possibilities are. What I will say is, to Richard's point earlier, you can do all sorts of customization, and you probably should. Like if somebody says, well, on this sponsorship level, you offer this, but I don't really need that. We would much prefer to have this. You can customize that. You can have that conversation, with each organization, and kind of personalize it to them. I just personally don't put a ton of effort into having many different versions of a packet. Just, it's a lot of updating. It can get confusing, especially if you're having board and volunteer use the packets, which one do they use when? So I generally will just create one.
Completely agree with everything that was just said. Absolutely.
Well, then, Tracy's wondering, how would you differentiate sponsorships and partnerships? Would you handle them any differently? And what additional strategies would you use at any point during the relationship?
Well, the partnership, you're having a much different conversation. I think they're really church and state, in my opinion. A partnership can be not just an annual partnership. You could look at a 2 to 3 year partnership. Literally, the ask is much more in a scaled level of giving. So they can plan towards it and build around that. And that partnership would probably incorporate both in-kind, team, employee related volunteer work and cash. I mean, that's really a much more holistic, broader opportunity. And those partnerships, to me, in the process of where I've seen them done and I've worked through, are really bespoke. They are really sit down with that organization and find out their goals and their mission around partnerships. Who else are they having partnerships with? And some of those attributed dollars from the partnership can be used as sponsor contributions for specific events. But the rest of that partnership may actually end up being a partnership of, shared board chairs, within organizations, one board seat for another board seat. Or it's the ability to have thought leadership shared between the organizations. Those type of partnership, that's how I look at partnerships versus a sponsorship program.
I would agree. I think the other piece to that would be, and again, I'll go back to Drake's Brewing as an example. We were talking about several different things in their partnership, right? We were talking about kind of that cars related marketing with the beer, and we were also talking about event sponsorship. There was board conversation. So it was about a 6-month process to work everything out. And we had a partnership agreement that we drafted, and both legal teams even looked at it. So, what were, rights to logo usage, making sure that, each organization had to look at the sponsorship materials before they're put out, that, we wanted to see what the beer cans look like. I mean, there was just so many different things that we had to think about. So it was a little bit more complicated when you're developing a multi-year or even an annual partnership, but where it's, again, I think of partnerships with there's more legality behind it. If it's a sponsorship, yes, there is something that you're agreeing to, but it's a packet that everybody's seeing, right? It's not super customized. This is your 10,000 level. This is your 5,000 level. They sign the check, you say thank you, and it's pretty much over. It's not quite as in depth, I think, to building true sponsorship or partnerships with somebody.
Then we have a question from Tracy from Visit Tri-Valley, which is, how much time do you allow for a major ask if connected to an event or building naming?
Loaded question.
Tracy.
I'll be quick. Richard. For me, I'm honestly saying probably 9 months to a year going back. For major gifts work, it often takes 6 or 7 meetings to be able to get to the final ask, and then you're not necessarily going to close it in that meeting, because you have to pitch what you're coming to talk about. You have to find out their questions. You probably want to take them of a tour, especially if it's for a capital sponsorship. You're working out, again, maybe some legal things if you're talking about exclusivity or naming rights. So there can be a lot of back and forth and things that you need to address before you can close on that gift. So, and you also have to recognize, depending upon the organization, you might be speaking to somebody in Pleasanton, but maybe they have to get their approvals from somebody up in Washington. Like I know REI had that, for instance, so you just have to make sure that you're understanding whatever their structural arrangements are and that you're building that in. Maybe for some it's going to be too much time, and you'll be lucky and you'll say, oh, I closed that in 2 meetings, yay. But you don't want to be surprised and be like, oh gosh, my event's in 2 months, I guess I should start asking people, because it's just not enough time.
Yeah. Events definitely would be a shorter window for 9 to 12 months. For building, for building naming, if it's a structure or facility for a capital campaign around an actual construction program, that's a much longer lead time, because in the naming process, certainly you want to ensure that they're not going to have any impact as to the actual structure or the physical structure. It's more about where that recognition is and how that is deployed, and that again, with that, there's is it going through designs and meeting with the architects and meeting with everybody else that's a part of the principal group and having those strategy conversations. That's a much longer commitment. And the infrastructure that goes along with that, the actual physical infrastructure that goes into what those naming rights will include. So I would say, 2 years to, anywhere from a year to 2 years out, being able to start those conversations, unless there's someone waiting in the wings. But I would say a year to 2 years.
Yeah.
We have a question from Leslie, and she's wondering who creates these sponsorship packets, internal or external resources used to produce, and what's the average cost to produce these pieces for online and print uses?
That's going to be a mixed answer. TVNPA, we do it pretty much internal. I work with them as their director of communications and development to produce the content, again, with the board and having other input. But what do we need that to look like? And then we have one of our beautiful board members who is really great in Canva, who helps us kind of refresh it or lay it out every year. The other organization that I showed you, John Muir Land Trust, again, they have a lot of internal folks who weigh in and do the content, but they have a designer that they work with every year who does the layout. So I think it just depends. And then, we've talked about Quest and Richard's work with them, and I'm thinking that they do mostly external. So but they're mostly a volunteer run organization. They don't have a lot of staff. So I don't think that they have the same luxury of having different people to lean on. So it really just depends on each of your organizations. I will say the majority of these that we produce are electronic. We send them via email. We embed them on the website. When they produced that packet for John Muir Land Trust, I wanted to say, just to mail it, it was just under $1.49 per packet just in mailing, and that was just a cover letter and that packet and an outer envelope. And then to print it, I'd have to go back and see, but I'm pretty sure each piece was probably close to $2. It wasn't cheap. It's full color. It was multiple pages. But you can design that. You can look at your own budget and say, okay, we're not going to make it 6 pages. We're going to make it 2 pages. And we're going to direct them to the website for more information. So I think you have flexibility there in how you lay it out.
Yeah, agree. And I would like to continue on with the questions.
I think that's all that we have in chat.
Ooh.
And unless there's anyone else, I just want to thank you both again for your time and your expertise in sharing. I'd again like to thank our program sponsor, Cynthia. We have Michelle Walker-Wade here today, which is always nice to have her in the room. And we will be sending out the recording. It usually takes a couple of days for that to be edited, and along with different packages. So look for that in the mail. Thank you all for joining us.